with God's help, we are now concluding this speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave over 30 years ago, in end of 1991, shortly before he had a stroke, which rendered him half paralyzed and mute. He couldn't speak. So these are very important speeches Rebbe gave, which are directing us until the final redemption of the world. And there's a lot of people that believe that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he's the Moshiach. The Rebbe used to say that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was the Moshiach, and he will raise from the dead, or he wasn't really dead, which is also an option in Judaism. It says that tzaddikim are always alive. And in any case, however it's going to be really good. And these words that we're learning now are definitely the words of the Mashiach. So what's the Rebbe talking about over here? The Rebbe is, first of all, stressing that the Torah is not just a book of religion, but it is the book of reality. It's the book of life, the book from which the world was created, and the reason why the world was created and is being created. Because we teach that God did not just create the world a long time ago and sort of let it go like that. That God is creating everything right now, every instant. Or in simple English, God does not really exist. Rather, God creates all existence. God is too real to be, defined as spiritual. God creates the spiritual. Everything that exists, God is creating it. On the other hand, God is also creating us, and He's listening to us, what we have to say. And one big message of Judaism to the world, in addition to this, that God is creating everything, and that He provides for us, and He listens to our prayers, and we are created in His image. But even more, that God is actively involved in the world, and this same God who creates us and enlightens all the bugs and all of this, He took the Jews out of Egypt. He actually, God, not an angel, says, no, malach, lo soraf, not by an angel, not by an emissary. God personally took us out of Egypt. I mean, of course, He did it by means of Moses, but God personally took us out of Egypt. He did the miracles. He provided the plagues. He split the sea, etc., gave us the Torah. So God is very involved in the world in a very, exact and dynamic, good word, way. And that is where we know that there's such a thing as Mashiach. From that command, from that fact, it's this first commandment in the 10 Commandments. First of the 10 Commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. And it is permissible for the world to worship only that God that creates the world. That's the fourth of the 10 Commandments, create the heavens and the earth. And that same God took us out of Egypt, the first of the 10 Commandments. And the second of the 10 Commandments, you cannot worship any other God. This refers to all mankind. But God also made a world where it is fun and fulfilling and etc. to worship other gods. We see there's 2.5 billion Christians, and they're all wrong. But it's fun. I mean, it's fulfilling. I don't know. It's fun. It's fulfilling. It's popular, powerful, like the golden calf. People like idolatry in various different forms. That's how God made the world. So and why do they like it? And because it fulfills some sort of a part of their personality, fulfills some sort of a personal need for stability and security and all these other things. It does. So in order to get people on the right track, I mean, you can't blame people for doing it, because that's the way God created people. So in order to get people on the right track, so there's another element what God created people to do, is that He created people to change themselves. People can change themselves. And they have the ability to change themselves properly, but there has to be something inside. And that's the idea of Chassidut. Chassidut comes to explain how every word of the Torah gives inspiration and direction and empowers us. Because it's not just the word God spoke a long time ago. This is God's word vibrating inside of us. So, but it's only given to the Jews, only the Jews. The Jews are supposed to use the Torah in order to, first of all, reveal their potential of every Jew to be a holy of holies, like it was in the Holy Temple, and then to spread it out to the whole world, like the Holy Temple was supposed to be. Okay, that's called going out of exile. And that was begun in these week's Torah portions, where Yaakov, took all of his children and went down into Egypt. Yosef brought them all down into Egypt. That's this week's Torah portions. And in the beginning, everything was good. And then eventually the Jewish people were fruitful and they multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And then it started really getting bad. Suddenly, whoop, and the Jews became slaves and they kept multiplying. And the Egyptians were sort of happy because they had more manpower, free. Until all of a sudden, we're going to see next week, Paro starts getting scared. He says, listen, these Jews, they're too many. We have to put more restrictions. Okay, but that's next week. We'll get to that next week. Nevertheless, this week is laying the ground for the exile of the Jews in Egypt. The Jews go down to Egypt. And that's in these four Torah portions that we're learning. Right? Vayeshev, that was last week. What is this? It was last week. And Miketz, and then Vayigash and Vayechi. That's going to be, Vayigash and Yechi is next 2 weeks. It says the Yaakov wanted to the Hemshech Parshas, all these from Vayeshev until Vayechi. We did this a little bit less yesterday. Here we go. These Torah portions that we learn about, these four Torah portions, Vayeshev, talks about Yosef. It begins talking about Yosef and how Yosef was sold by his brothers. He goes down to Egypt, becomes successful, all the brothers come down, and finally Vayechi, that Yaakov gives a blessing to all of his children before he dies. Vayechi. Yaakov is in Egypt, right? And all of his sons, including Yosef, are all alive. So he gives them from Vayechi. Kasher, this is all connected to the exile, like it says Vayeshev Yaakov, the Yaakov that Vayeshev. Let's take the first one. This was 2 weeks ago. Vayeshev Yaakov. Last week, I'm sorry. Last week. Bikesh Yaakov wanted the Shalva. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. Shlemos HaShalva, the Moshiach. Yaakov desired that there should be the peaceful time of the days of the Mashiach. What's going to be in the days of the Mashiach? Everyone will be free to serve God. There won't be any unnecessary distractions. There'll be challenges, but no distractions. And that's the days of the Mashiach. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. Because of God, Mitzido, that Yaakov already was prepared for the future redemption. That's last week's Torah portion. Now this week's Torah portion, Miketz. Ketz is talking about Ketz Yamin. This is mentioned in Daniel, the book of Daniel. The end of days and the end of days. Yamin is in Aramaic. But it means the end of the exile and the beginning of the redemption. We talked about that before. Next week's Torah portion, Vayigash. This means when Yehuda goes close to Yosef. That's the topic spoken about next week. This is translated as the juxtapositions word of the redemption, which is Yosef, is the Geula, the redemption to Tefillah, to prayer, which is Yehuda. Why this is, we'll talk about later, but that's nevertheless what it is. Until Yehuda and Yosef come together to one tree, and they will be like one. The David Avdi Nasi Layam Olam. And David, my servant, King David, will be a servant for them for all. It's a sentence in Yechezkel. This is the Haftorah of next week's Torah portion, Vayigash. The Haftorah that we read. So all these four Torah portions, beginning last week, this week, next week, and the week after, they're all talking about. 1 second. Please don't make these lines, please. Vayechi Yaakov Chayim Nitzchim, eternal life of Yaakov, for every single Jew was called by Yaakov and Yisrael, etc. Okay, could whoever made the line, please, by accident, I'm sure, please erase it on purpose or on, okay. The Inyan Bazar is like this. The Yaakov is the third here in the choice of the forefathers. Kashur with the Geula Shlishis, this is attached to the future redemption and the third temple. Geula Nitzchis, Beit HaMikdash Nitzchi. What does it mean, the third redemption? God took the Jews out of Egypt, right? That's already mentioned in the Ten Commandments. That's the first redemption. Second redemption, God took us out of Babylon, built the second temple. And the third redemption will be what Moshiach builds the third temple. To Yaakov, and that's the number 3. Yaakov, it says he called the place by it. It says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all saw the place of the third temple. Abraham called it a mountain, Isaac called it a field, and Jacob, he called it a house. Nachala b'li Mitzorim, namely, this is our portion, which is unlimited. Ki Yaakov, like Yaakov, which is written by Yaakov, Ufratz the Yom HaKedma, that Yaakov will spread out. So, it is the destiny of the Jewish people that eventually the whole world will believe in the Creator, that what Creator is creating them. And that's what Yaakov Avinu, to spread out the whole world. Because why? What happens when you believe in the Creator, right? What happens when you believe in the Creator? Then you can do one of two things. Just keep doing what you're doing because God is creating you. So must be everything's okay, right? If God's creating you, for instance, to be a thief, so God must want you to be a thief. That's God's creating you to do it. Or you can say, listen, maybe God is creating me because he wants me to change myself. What am I supposed to do? That's the Torah. The Torah tells us how we can change ourselves, what God demands from us. What are the laws? Which is not the case. The whole thing of Jacob is Torah. Which is not the case of Abraham and Yitzchak. Sha'av Shalom do Torah, even though that they learned Torah. Avram Avinu, like it says, Avram was old and he certainly learned Torah. Yitzchak, he said, certainly learned Torah. This is from the prayers that we say on Simcha Torah. Nevertheless, the main thing of Abraham was to give charity. The main thing of Yitzchak was prayer. But the main thing of Yaakov was Torah. Because Yaakov was the third and he was balanced. And the whole thing of Torah is to balance the world. You do it like it's known that Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov, they correspond to the 3 pillars, right, left, and middle. Right is Gemilat Chasadim, acts of kindness, that's Abraham. Avoda is service, that was especially the service of the sacrifices, and now we don't have sacrifices, is the service of prayer, going from below to above, giving our energy up to God. But Yaakov is Torah, Yaakov was balanced. Like it says, Yaakov ish tam Yoshev Oilim, like it says, Yaakov was I'd say, ish tam Yoshev Oilim. Could everybody check and see whoever made this yellow line to please erase it? Okay, good, no problem. It also doesn't disturb me that much, but whoever did do it would also be nice if they did away with it. Okay, Menachem, check your thing. Maybe it could be you. Although this is the tent of Shem and the tent of Aver. Torah Shebechtav, Torah Shebal Peh, the revealed Torah, the hidden Torah. Okay, so the thing of Yaakov, he set the stage for the giving of the Torah. Yaakov was the one who brought the Jews into Egypt. And that's the first of the 10 commandments. I am God that took you out of Egypt. So Yaakov was the one who really prepared for the Torah. And also according to Kabbalah, it's also the same thing that Yaakov was the preparation for the Torah. A little bit of that we learned over here, that Abraham corresponded to what's called God's chesed, God's love, giving. That's what Abraham did. He gave free food away, and he tried to teach the world that there's a creator of the universe. And Yitzchak, he said, he dug wells, he changed the situation so that there would be water, that would be able to inhabit the desert. Right? That's gevura, that's power to change things. That's like prayer. Okay. But Yaakov was balanced. And all of these Torah portions that we're talking about now talk about Yaakov. That was the idea of balance. That's the Torah. But Yocham Eidos B'Yaakov, that's what it says, that there will be laws in Jacob, and Torah God put into Yisrael. Yaakov and Yisrael is the same person, right? God just changed his name. That's from Psalms, Tehillim, 78, Psalm 78. Yaakov is the middle pillar that goes from one into the other above any limitations. But the main and the completion of drawing down this Yaakov into the world, this was done by means of Yosef. This is done by means of Yosef. When Yosef went down into Egypt, after it says that Yosef went down to Egypt, what happened? It says that Yaakov, before the famine came, right? So Yaakov was sitting in Israel, Holy Land. That's where Yaakov was. That's our next week's Torah portion. That's what last week's Torah portion started off. Vayishav Yaakov be'eretz Megureyav be'eretz Canaan. It says Yaakov lived in Canaan. He was there together with all of his sons. Everything was wonderful. Right? That was Yaakov. He wanted to sit in peace. That's how the first sentence goes. Right? First couple sentences. Yaakov was great. Yaakov was already looking forward to the future redemption. And that's going to be by means of the Torah. And the future redemption, that's one of the reasons also Moshiach is going to build a third temple. Because the third temple, what was the main thing of the temple? The Torah. The Holy of Holies had the tablets that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. That was the Holy of Holies. In the first temple, it was revealed where it was supposed to be. In the second temple, the tablets were hidden. They were hidden down deep, but in the same place. In the same place. It was just, how do you say? But they were hidden down deep. In the third temple, they'll be revealed again. That'll be the whole thing of the Torah. So it says, Yaakov was already ready for this. Yaakov was ready for this. What happened? All of a sudden, the whole story with Yosef. His brothers sold him into captivity, and Yosef went down, and Yaakov was mourning all this time. But all of a sudden, Kavetz Alav Rogzo She Yosef. There jumped on Yaakov what's called the troubles of Yosef. Like it says, Elah told us Yaakov Yosef. Right? These are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef. Yosef was 17 years old, right, when he was sold down into Egypt. The Al-Yadeh by means of this, you went down to Egypt. And after that, the Al-Yadeh Akdamas, Limud, Torah, by learning Torah, Kol Mashalom at Yaakov, everything that Yaakov learned from Shem the Aver, he gave over to Yosef. Shazuhi, this is an Atinat Koach, this is an empowering of Yaakov to Yosef. I'll call him, or as the Yaakov gave Yosef the ability and the power to withstand all of the things that were going to happen to Yosef, being put in prison for 12 years and being hated by his brothers, and then afterwards being a king in Egypt. When Yaakov finally went down into Egypt, we're going to learn that in 2 weeks, and he was reunited with all of his children, then Yaakov was really alive. And it says, why was he really alive? Because he learned the Torah, Gilui Torah. Now it's true that the Torah only was given 300 years afterwards, after the Jews left Egypt. After Yaakov went down, into Egypt. After Yaakov went down into Egypt, it was 300 years later about that the Torah was given. But it says that Abraham knew the whole Torah before it was given, and so did Yitzchak. They did the commandments. And Yaakov also knew in a spiritual way, but they did everything they could physically. They did. Couldn't put on tefillin, and tefillin it's written parchments where it says, "I am God that took you out of Egypt." You can't. The Gila, the revelation of the Torah, which is Yaakov, was brought further down by means of Yosef, even into Egypt. Egypt is the language of Meitzar, of limitations, v'gavul. By means of this, now at least Yosef, you can come to even a higher level. Al-derech, like it says, mina Meitzar, karasi, ane. By means of being in Egypt, the Jewish people revealed a higher level of godliness, of the giver of the Torah into the world. That's what made it possible for the actual Torah to be given on Mount Sinai. Which, giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, that was the biggest miracle that ever happened in the history of the world. I don't think you'll find that in any history book. In the world, is there such a thing? I don't think so. They learned that in university? No way. It could be, I don't know. But in any case, that's the fact that the giving of the Torah was the biggest miracle ever to occur in the history of the world, even greater than going out of Egypt. Because when God gave the Torah, there was already a hint at the raising of the dead. When God gave the Torah, the revelation of godliness was so intense, it was like the Holy of Holies. And everybody's soul jumped out of their bodies. All the Jews, they all heard. They all saw. It says, panim b'panim, they were face to face with that. Who knows what that means? But it was like going into the Holy of Holies. Everybody died, and God enlivened them. And that's a hint at the raising of the dead. The raising of the dead is the highest, it is an incomprehensible miracle. What's going to be? Okay, nevertheless, Yaakov prepared the way for this. That Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they prepared the way for all these three things. The Geula Amitit Shlema, the true future redemption. Looking, therefore, Shayachet Gama Geula, therefore the future redemption is relevant to Yaakov who prepared it, and Yosef was the manifestation of everything that Yaakov stood for in the world. In the end, Yosef was really the king of the world. He's something like the Moshiach, but he wasn't, because Yosef made everybody comfortable. And Mashiach is not going to make everybody comfortable. Mashiach is going to show everyone what God expects from them and show them that they have the power to do it. But they just have to use their free will to. Like it says in the end of our Torah portion, Vayomer Yosef said, Elokim pokad yifkod etchem. Pokad yipoked eschem. Pokad yipoked eschem. That God will visit you. This was a key sort of secret password that Moses was going to use this later, 300 years later, to take the Jews out. Pokad yipoked means Elokim eschem. This hints at that B'yomahu Yosef Hashem Shenit v'Yosef Nidche Yisrael. This is a hint at the Mashiach. When Mashiach says, on that day, God will again take his hand to gather the Jews, and he will gather all the Jews from all of the world to Israel. God will gather you. Where does it say this? In Isaiah. Look over there, Isaiah 11, 12. This, by the way, in Isaiah, like the first 40 chapters, Isaiah's like 60 chapters, 60 something, 3 chapters. The first 40 chapters is mostly Isaiah chastising the Jewish people. Isaiah was like in the middle of the first temple. And the Jewish people were not acting properly, that's the history of the Jewish people. They're always acting not, so they're acting not properly. And the first 40 chapters, Isaiah really lets them have it. But nevertheless, there's always something good in every single chapter. Isaiah is always saying to the Jews, listen, you guys, God is finished with you. That's it. He's going to scatter you all over the world. You don't know how much trouble you're making for God. You don't know how much you're angering God. But God loves you. And that's why he's so angry, because he's stuck with you. He's never going to let you go. Right? He's never going to let you go. And eventually you're going to catch on, and you're going to do what you're supposed to, and the whole thing is going to be worth it for God, and it's going to be worth it for you. And that's Isaiah. It says, God is going to gather, what happened over here? Yosef, God will gather, Yosef means to gather also. Yosef, he'll gather all the Jewish people that were scattered all over the world, which of course that's talking about now, because up to now the Jews haven't been scattered around the whole world. Yud Aleph. My microphone is static. Maybe it's me. Huh? My throat.
What's the microphone on your laptop?
Okay, but it's not a laptop. See, I can't show you a picture of it because it's taking my picture. Okay.
Is that the same device you usually use?
Always. I'll listen to it afterwards, and I'll see, and if so, I'll take.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit muffled.
Appropriate steps. Muffled. Maybe the base is too. Okay, I'll listen to it afterwards. It's too late to change now. Yud Aleph. Alpis, according to this, now we can explain the words of Yaakov when he came to Egypt. Yaakov comes down to Egypt with all of a sudden, this is going to be later on, next week. Yaakov comes down to Egypt, and of course, Paro is very happy to see him. This is the father of the man who saved the whole world, Yosef. He saved Egypt, he saved the whole world. So Paro is very happy to see him. And also, so it says that also it says that when Yaakov came down, that the famine stopped. The famine stopped. There was 1 year of famine, and the whole Nile River dried up. And when Yaakov came, the Nile River went back up again. So understandably, Paro was happy to see him. So Paro said to him, "How are you? How are you doing?" And Yaakov said, "Right, how was your life?" And he said, "Vayomer Yaakov el Paro." Paro said, "Kam yamei chayecha." How old are you? So Yaakov said, "Yamei chayei megurai shloshim u'me'at shana." I am 130 years old. Me'at v'ra'im hayu yamei shnei chayai. Bad and few were the days of my life. V'lo isigu et yamei shnei chayei abotai. And they did not reach to the days of my forefathers, my father and my grandfather. Yitzchak lived 180 years old. Abraham lived 175 years old. It says, one second, doesn't make any sense. Yaakov said, I'm 130 years old. That's pretty good, 130 years old. Huh? That's it. He should have said, I'm 130. Paro said, how old are you? 130. What did he say? He said, I am 130 years old. Me'at v'ra'im. He said, my life has been very few. It says, me'at v'ra'im. Very bad and few. Few and bad were the years of my life. Why did he have to say that for? This doesn't make any sense. First of all, because Paro heard from Yaakov the number of his life, so he knew that the life of Yaakov was very many. Yaakov doesn't have to say anything afterwards that they were bad. Why? That there was few and they were bad. They weren't few. Number two, the words of Yaakov said his life of 30 and 100 years, and he said that this was few. Yaakov said it's few. These words to say that it's few, this not only is an extra thing to say, but it's not so. People lived 120 years old. That was good. And they were 10 years more than what God told Noah, that people were only going to live 120 years old. True, people lived longer than that, but nevertheless, it says to Noah that the life of man is going to be 120. People that got more life because they had more merits, who knows, whatever. But it certainly, 130 was not few. Shalom, this is even stronger when it's explained later on that Paro, he asked Yaakov, how old are you? Why? Because Shejar Kobo Seva Voya Nira Zatain Road. That Paro, according to, why did Paro ask Yaakov, how old are you? That's the thing you ask people when you meet them. How old are you? He said, because according to some of the commentaries, that suddenly Yaakov looked tremendously old. And Paro was very surprised because most people don't have such long life. He looked 130 years old. And Paro was amazed because people never lived to that age. According to this, so it's even more. Why did he have to say, I'm 130 years old and they're few? This is the opposite of what was obviously not true. And in fact, it wasn't true. People usually don't live that long. That's why Paro even asked him, because he looked old. So, but there must be some point in this. I mean, the Torah tells us that that's what the answer of Yaakov. At first glance, right? What is it supposed to be? Anytime somebody asks, hey, Joe, how are you? Oh, I'm terrible. You should always give a bad answer, right? Oh, yeah, I feel awful. Don't ask. My shoulder, my this. Of course, that's not so. But Yaakov did it. Why shouldn't I do it? Says the Rebbe, we can say, this is only, maybe we could say, listen, maybe it means that it's a few years. This is only regarding, compared to the life of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. of Abraham and Isaac. I'm sorry, that he didn't get to the longevity of Abraham, who was 175 years old, or to 130 years old of Yitzchak. In other words, when Paro was amazed at the age of Yaakov, as Yaakov said that I have got long life up to now, that's nothing compared to my forefathers. That's a nice answer. Like the life of Abraham Isaac. You think I'm old now? My father was my grandfather. They were much older. They were 180 years old. And why did I look so old? Because my life has been very bad. I've had a lot of troubles. Yosef was gone from me. I didn't know what was happening. I had to fight with my brother Esav. I had to fight with Lavan, my uncle. That Rashi says Lo Yisigu B'Tova. Rashi says that what does it mean? That these words bad and few, it implies that what? That it's not in comparison to anybody, not just in regard that his life, Yaakov was saying, my life is bad and my years are few, not in relation to anything else, right? If I would live 200 years, it would be few. So what does he have to tell Paro this for? Why is it written in the Torah? Yeshlomo, we can say the explanation is the days of the dwelling of my life that I dwelled in the world were few, even though that they were 130 years old. This is not talking about in quantity, but quality. Even though that in fact in quantity they are many, but in quality they're terrible. Why? Because the days were all missing. The opposite of what it says by Abraham, that Abraham was coming in days. What does it mean? Abraham's days were filled. But Yaakov, no. Yaakov was missing the main thing in his life. What was it missing? Abraham wanted to serve God. Yitzchak wanted to serve God. Those were good. Yaakov wasn't just satisfied with serving God. We'll see, they were bad because what? Yaakov, when did Yaakov's life start to be good? When he went down to Egypt. When he was in Egypt, 17 years in Egypt. These were the best years of his life. We can say why? Because by means of this, he also reached the lives of his forefathers in quality. Even though he only lived for 147 years, but nevertheless, in quality, he reached his ultimate perfection, which is even the level of Yitzchak was 180 years old. It says that Abraham was also supposed to live for 180 years, but God took him out of the world 5 years early when Esav was 13 years old, because that's when Esav turned sour. Esav started doing all sorts of sins and stole ladies from under the wedding. So the explanation is like this. The inside of Yaakov, what is Yaakov? That since that the whole thing of Yaakov was the Geula, the future redemption. And since when Yosef was born, then when Yosef was born, then Yaakov was ready to go back to, right? Yaakov was, what happened over there? Yosef was the last of the sons to be born in the house of Lavan. As soon as Yosef was born, as Yaakov said, now I can leave Lavan, which was outside of Israel, and go back to Israel. My life has been complete. I can now sit in peace. All the time that Yosef did not actually bring the future redemption, it was considered to be that his life was very few. His life was missing. Because the main thing by Yaakov was not just to serve God, it was to see the results of this, namely the total redemption of the Jewish people. that all the Jews would be in Israel, everything would be fine. Yaakov thought that was beginning. That was beginning. He was sitting in Israel with all of his children. They were all together. And all of a sudden, what happened? Yosef gets sold into slavery. He realized that the world is not ready for the redemption yet. Inyan said that's what Yaakov let know to Paro. That you shouldn't think that Yaakov and his sons, they were satisfied with the fact that they were living in the best place of the land of Egypt, that they stopped world famine, that they saved all mankind. And now, and as a reward, Paro gave them the Chelav, it's the best place of the land of Egypt. He said, that's because that's not what I want. The main thing by Yaakov was that all of the Jews have to be aware of God in the land of Israel. Ubamela, since, so automatically, Gam Yeshivatam, so therefore, even though he was living in Egypt 17 years, by means of living in Egypt for these 17 years, that's what actually started bringing the redemption. Why? Because he was back together with his son, Yosef, and he realized that Yosef was the king of the world in order to fix up the world. So, and this was really beginning. He was in Egypt fixing up the world. So this is the ultimate completion. So then Yaakov lived not just 147 years, which that's in fact what he lived physically, and not even 180 years like his father, but Chaim Nitzchim, eternal life. That's why it says Yaakov Avinu lo met. What can we learn? Yaakov Avinu did not die, it says. One of the things we can learn from this is, since that our generation is the last generation of the exile, and it's the first generation of the future redemption, the beginning of the redemption. So therefore, we are now in special days which are relevant to the future redemption, whether regarding the Torah portion, Miketz, the end of days, the end of the exile, Ketz Yamim, and the beginning end of the redemption, or well, because we're now found in the days of Chanuka, that Chanuka was on the miracle of oil, which we talked about before. Oil is the secrets of the Torah. That's the union of Shemen Kodshi, my holy oil I have anointed you with, like we learned before, right, in Psalms, but that's in 80, was it 89, Psalm 89. And especially in this Shabbat, this coming Shabbat Chanuka, that Shabbat is known that it's attached to the future redemption. Redemption is going to be, it says, Yom Shekul Shabbat, it's going to be. And especially in this year, that it's after the fifth night of Chanuka. This is the Shabbat. This is the day of the redemption of the Alter Rebbe, and then he got out from a second imprisonment. And the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, and he got out in Yutet Kislev. And about 1 year later, he was imprisoned again, on more severe charges, but in better conditions. But in any case, the charges were against Chassidut itself. And he was released. When on the fifth night of Chanukah, that's when he got released. And this is Rosh Chodesh. This Shabbat is going to be Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month of Tevet. That this shows on the Jewish people are renewed like the moon, and they count according to the moon, and that they're going to be renewed like the moon in the future redemption. So therefore, because we have all these signs, so we should add on every day, which that's the lesson of Chanukah. You have to continue making more and more light in things that bring the actual redemption in the world. And among them, what are we supposed to do? Chizuk and Muna, first of all, strengthening our faith and our attachment and our, waiting impatiently for the arrival of Moshiach, to the degree that will be felt by every single person, calls much a Mashiach Tzidkenu, that the Mashiach did not yet come in a revealed way. Because it says Mashiach is going to gather he's going to build a holy temple and gather the Jews to Israel. It's very interesting. If you look over in the Maimonides, so he talks about two different stages of the Mashiach. First stage of the Mashiach is what's called a person that is, we can assume is the Mashiach, that he has all the qualifications of Moshiach. He tries to strengthen, he knows the whole Torah. He tries to strengthen Judaism everywhere. He tries to encourage Jews to do Torah and the commandments, especially, which that obviously is Lubavitcher Rebbe, is the direct descendant of King David, and etc. And it says, and if he gets killed, if he gets assassinated or murdered, then that disqualifies him. But if he doesn't get killed, or if he fails, if his work starts, whatever his teachings are ignored, and okay, that's stage number one. That he's the strengthening Judaism, bringing people to be more aware that any second Mashiach is going to come. It's the first of the 10 commandments. God took us out of Egypt. God makes changes in the world. Judaism is based on big miracles. It's going to happen for sure. That's number one. But stage number two, and because Mashiach has not come, so we should be crazy. Because Mashiach has not brought to stage number two, so we should be crazy. If so, that we should feel like Yaakov. Yaakov said that my days are bad and few. Our days are missing, like Yaakov said, that even 130 years are few. Because since the Mashiach has not come. But the main thing is, we have to learn the inside of the Torah, the ideas of Chassidut. Come to class in the morning. We learn Torah or Lakuti Torah. To learn Torah in general, and that's the whole thing of Yaakov's Torah. And also we should learn the inner Torah, the Chassidut, the oil, the secrets of the Torah, in a way that it shines out into the world, like you put the Chanuka candles in a way that they shine outward. Yafutza manetach chutza, like the Mashiach said to the Baal Shem Tov, when your deep teachings, your oil, your well springs are spread out, until until there's no one that rebels against God anymore. Namely, and also we should add on in the mitzvah of Chanuka, which includes also making forbringings, happy forbringings, like the Rambam said that in the days of Chanuka, these are days of happiness and praise of God. That we can add on in doing the custom of giving money of Chanuka to our. Okay, we have to stop because all of this is a special teaching of this year. We can say that the lighting the Chanuka lights and putting it outside, and that the public can see it, is especially on Shabbat Chanuka. That Shabbat Chanuka, that even public domains, and especially we have to learn the laws of Shabbat. It becomes a place of that the public domain should be like a private domain, and that's what happened in Chanuka. That it said that the darkness, that there were no more Talmudai. Talmudai were this. We talked about it before. It means there was no more rebellion, and that it expressed not only was there no rebellion, but Kalia. It says V'yachulu. That's Shabbos. V'yachulu Hashemayim Boaz. That even those people who oppose the creator of the universe and his Torah will be excited about it. That's Shabbat Chanukah. And especially when Shabbat Chanukah falls on Rosh Chodesh, which that's going to be this Shabbat. This stresses even more that we have to add more and more light incomparable to what it was before, into a way that it's chidush. That's the idea of chidush, the renewal of the moon. The biggest renewal that there can possibly be. And even more this year, just like back then, Rosh Chodesh is 2 days. It's going to be Shabbat and Sunday, the beginning of the next month, the month of Tevet. But then the first day of Rosh Chodesh of the new month falls on Shabbat. So automatically, therefore, the second day of Rosh Chodesh is the day after Shabbat. Since that the Haftorah of Shabbat, we talk about the second day of Rosh Chodesh. This week we have a special Haftorah that talks about when Shabbat falls on Rosh Chodesh. There's a special Haftorah, and there's also a special Haftorah when the day after Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh. So we read both of them. So it's a double renewal on top of renewal. May it be God's will that even before we add on the light of Chanuka right before this evening. And we give the Chanuka gifts, money of Chanuka, not just in a way of a gift, but in a way that it is, we owe the children, and God will give to us also. It says it's a custom on Chanuka to give money to the children of the family. So we're God's children. So it says, now Yisrael Ohav Vehu, says that the Jewish people are like the children of God. So God has to give us Chanuka money. And he gives us in the most urgent thing that we really need, the redemption, the Geula Mitit V'Shlema, the future redemption by means of David, the Melech Moshiach, King David. And it should be actual. And by means of this, there'll be the renewal of the third temple, actually. And the main thing is, even before we pray Mincha, the Rebbe spoke about this in Shabbat, even before we pray the prayer of Mincha, and we read in Mincha Parshat Yigash, next week's Torah portion. The Rebbe said all this on Shabbat, and the Hasidim just remembered everything after Shabbat, and they sat together and they went over it and they wrote it down, and then they handed it into the Rebbe to see if it was accurate or not, and he would make certain corrections and give it back to them. That the main thing is talking about the future redemption in a way that the redemption will come even before we pray the prayer of Mincha, immediately. And since that the future redemption is going to come in one instant, so therefore, and it's going to come on so therefore, automatically, tomorrow, the day after Shabbat, will already be the 10th day of, the Rosh Chodesh Tevet. Tevet will be Asiri L'Chodesh Yom Tov. The 10th day will be a holiday. Asiri B'Tevet is a fast day. But because the Mashiach is going to come before, so the 10th day of Tevet is next month, right? That's in Shabbat. It'll be the beginning of the month. So therefore, Mashiach is going to come on the first day. So therefore, like the Rambam says in the end, that all the fasts will be eliminated on the days of the Mashiach. And not only will they be eliminated, but they'll be transformed into days of happiness and joy and feasting. Like it says, Kol Ma Hashem Tzum Asiri will be Yisrael Sasim V'Simcha, the Moedim Tov, they'll be for big holidays. So we have a lot to look for this Shabbos with the arrival of Mashiach and the building of the temple. It has to happen sometime, and it can happen in 1 second. So why not in this second? Have a good Shabbat with Mashiach. Now we're going to do the Yom Yom. So anyone who wants to can hold on.